When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 72, Translating the Father Wound into New Meaning for His Own Children. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our courageous and daring guest, Johnny Thompson. Johnny is a husband of 43 years, father of 3, and a grandfather of 4. He loves life, family, and is devoted to serving in leadership ministry and community as a caring pastor and mentor to men. Johnny serves as an associate pastor at Sanctuary Church in Costa Mesa, California. He serves as the men's ministry pastor and care pastor. Born and raised in Los Angeles, California, where at the age of 13, he began to experience a lifestyle of drugs and alcohol filled with shame, rejection, abandonment, and thoughts of suicide. He turned his life completely around when he decided as a teenage father to become the father that he never had and made a commitment to pursue the journey of finding effective purpose through family and faith. Johnny also serves in support alongside his 15-year-old granddaughter, whose nonprofit organization extends aid and support to the homeless community throughout local communities and going as far as Ghana, South Africa, and cities around the world. This has been an 8-year journey that has been hope for thousands of people. 2023 marks his 40th year in leadership service, and he remains committed to a life of serving to encourage and empower the lives of others. Hello, Johnny. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Hi, Salima. Thank you. I am so honored to be a part of it. Thank you.
You are most welcome, and I'm glad that you're here. I'm so excited that you and I have this opportunity to chat, for you to come on the show today. I'm really grateful for that. I'm grateful for your ability to show up with willingness to tell your story. I really, truly feel blessed and honored when I encounter guests such as yourself who really just allow me to tap into their vulnerabilities and draw on their strengths, and insight and inspiration from the stories that come up are just really mesmerizing. So I truly believe it's important that we take a stance together to help break barriers of mental stigma.
And I couldn't agree with you more. It's definitely been a challenge for me, of course. And I'm just, again, so appreciative that you would allow me to share my story and to someone as special as you. That's for sure.
Oh my goodness. Well, honestly, like I understand that sometimes people come on the show and it can be nerve-wracking to speak publicly, to delayer, to tap in to your core. But I always am so grateful when I hear the stories that come up. And I know the listeners are just as grateful, and they're very meaningful to share. So much gratitude that you're here and that you're saying yes to sharing. So that's the most important thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so I'm not really sure that you're still wondering, but if there's a part of you that has a little query about, what this podcast is all about, and really it's exactly what we just spoke about, right? It's bringing forward those untold stories that people go through, whether it's directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And the one common denominator theme that we know is that no matter what the story, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way. And that typically remains tucked away. So this platform, Johnny, it serves in a way to break those barriers of mental stigma that we have been conditioned to in our society. And so that's why today is so important for our conversation. It's that mission for both of us to really encourage people to share and tell what individuals, tuck away and keep reserved. And of course, I continue to bring a trend forward, and it's called the Mental Beauty Rethink. Johnny, tell me, I want to know what comes to mind first when you hear this phrase, the Mental Beauty Rethink.
I think what probably comes to my mind first is mental health in terms of just having a healthy perspective and healthy outlook, healthy perception. Of course, life is filled with so many things, so many moving pieces, and so many things that are negative. It just speaks to being in a place where you balance out perspective and perception to a healthy place. And so that's been my experience, just trying to create a healthy place in my mind and in my mental health just to continue to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Building a healthy mindset is so important, and being able to balance perception, outlook, perspective is so key. And one of the things that I share with people sometimes is that for me, when I first thought about these words, it wasn't so much about thinking about it as good or bad or right or wrong, just something that allowed us to be open and curious, and something that was invitational. So I often find that the moment you start talking about mental health in certain places, even in conversations, people tend to shy away from those conversations. They're not as eager to talk about them as they would be, even if it was something very unique or complex with physical health. So it just dawned on me that, okay, mental beauty, does that open the doors to allow people to think about it from a different lens? So when you tell me, yeah, I'm looking for that balance, it's to create that balance. It's to build that healthy mindset and get that perspective and outlook and perception balanced. I really like that you use the word balance. It resonates a lot for me.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing your perspective, Johnny. This was so amazing.
Absolutely.
Okay, my friend, I'm ready to tap into your untold story. I hope you are too.
Let's do it.
Lovely, lovely. Let's go for it. Okay, Johnny, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. How would it read?
It would probably read Surviving the Father Wound for me. And that would be the wound of absence and the challenge of what I'd had to go through just to kind of maintain some sense of balance to sort of move forward to be better because of the missing pieces that were a part of my life.
Mm-hmm. Okay, can you say your title one more time?
Surviving the wound of absence.
Surviving the father wound, the wound of absence. Right. I really like how you have been able to talk about or expand on it and share about maintaining this balance. See, the word balance is coming up again, and the missing pieces in your life and how you move through that. I guess that's what we're going to be talking about as we unpack your story.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I have to be honest about it. This is the first time that I am talking about it. And
Wow.
so it should be interesting because it definitely made me kind of rehearse some things that were
Hmm.
probably not so pleasant.
Right. I mean, sometimes when we do have to recall events, not all of them are pleasant, but you have my word, we'll be gentle. We'll go gentle and we'll make sure that you are the boss in the storytelling here. So whatever you are comfortable sharing is what we want to hear.
Sure.
So yeah, let's get into it. Tell us about your untold story. Tell us about the who, what, when, where.
Well, of course, I grew up in a home where it was a single parent. Of course, I am the fourth son
Mm-hmm.
of a teenage mother who was an incredible mother. She had me 2 weeks before her 18th birthday, and so she raised me and my brothers in an environment that maybe wasn't the best environment, but I do have to give her props because she always advanced us forward and so raised us very respectfully. But I just remember as a kid wanting and missing a dad, you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so with that experience, it was oftentimes I discovered that, I went to the wrong places, did the wrong things, had the wrong mindset, and didn't know it then in the moment. But I think as I continue to live on, I discovered that I had certain behaviors and I gravitated to certain things because I was just this broken kid that felt
Mm-hmm.
like maybe I was the reason my dad wasn't around. And I don't know why I felt like that or thought like that, but I thought maybe perhaps it was my fault. And so I
Right.
kind of walked through life victimizing myself, I guess, in a sense, thinking, okay, I'm the reason why he's not there without even really understanding why I felt like that or thought like
Mm-hmm.
that. But that was that hidden thing down in the bottom, I guess, of my life that I didn't have enough sense or capacity to even acknowledge or understand at the time.
Right. And so what you're saying is that not only was you didn't have a father who was emotionally present, but he physically wasn't there when you were growing up.
Absolutely. Yeah, no dad. And I later discovered as an adult that he only lived a half hour away, but he was never present in my life.
Did he know about you?
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
Right.
he knew about me. He knew about me. And again, I was the youngest of four brothers, but they were all, my mom and my dad, they were all very young. They were teenagers, and
Hmm.
life back then was uniquely different, but it impacted my life
Hmm.
eventually, of course. I think I was 22 years old when I met my dad for the first time
Wow.
that I can recall.
Okay. What was it like to have that experience to meet your father after 22 years of absence?
I have to admit that it was empty because there was no expectation. I just sort of felt like he wasn't around, and so maybe I didn't miss what I didn't have.
Hmm.
It was just an odd occurrence. And meeting him, it was just a very short handshake. He said, "Come see me again if you ever get an opportunity to do so." And interestingly enough, and the story shifts, is that 2 weeks later, I was attending his funeral. And so it was just a very odd, weird kind of experience. But I'm thankful for it. But at the same time, it was just a weird occurrence in the time frame of my life. It was just something that I couldn't explain, but I was
Hmm.
glad to experience it. And so the experience itself, it meant nothing to me
Hmm.
because it was forced that we were together and on at that time, at that moment. And so I felt like I didn't miss anything that I didn't have. But it was later that I discovered that, yeah, there were probably some extreme missing ingredients in my life because he wasn't there. But I think as a kid, you try to just shield yourself and protect yourself from the
Hmm.
things that you didn't have and the emotions that you didn't understand. And so that was my experience. It was just a
Yeah.
quick moment, and I went to his funeral just to honor a man that I didn't know.
Right.
Yeah.
When you talk about the whole part of experiencing missing ingredients and not knowing when you were a child, and growing up, you were just kind of surviving, right? And I think that's
Exactly.
what it is, right? So when we're in our earlier years, we don't have autonomy. So
Hmm.
we are dependent on our caregivers. We are dependent on our parents or whoever it is that is raising us. And so we learn quickly to adapt. We're adapting for survival. That's the only way to make it at that time. But it's interesting that you mentioned this because it's over time that we sometimes get conditioned to respond in a certain way, and certain patterns of how we operate develop and stay with us. But that's when we need to kind of connect and check in with ourselves to say, hey, that was something I was doing for survival. I was adapting because I had to. It was a requirement to survive. But I don't actually need to do that right now. Or do I need to do that right now? Is this still good for me? If
Hmm.
I'm not in survival mode, is this still serving me well? Is there something else that would be serving me better? Is this something I need to let go of, right? I think it provides us an opportunity to see that the ways in which we've had to adapt to situations based on whatever the upbringing was, and then look deeper at, okay, and what of that am I still doing now?
Absolutely, and I love the fact that you brought that up. That my adapting to it was really survival,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And so, but what I did not realize, of course, adapting to that as survival, I adopted all of these habits as the walls around me to get through it, to have a certain mindset about it, and to replace something that I didn't have with other things that were extremely unhealthy. And so, but again, all of that, as you stated, was really packaged as survival mode. Of course,
Hmm.
at my age, I didn't know that. I just went with the flow.
Right. We rarely do, but it was, when you think back, you're going, oh, my choices and my decisions were all based on these things that I carved out for myself.
Right, exactly.
Hmm.
100%.
Hmm.
100%.
Okay, so tell me, like, I know that you said when you met your father, it felt like you were forced to be together. Do you like, do you remember what that 2 week period was like? Obviously, during that time after you met your father, you did not know he was going to die in 2 weeks or that you'd be attending his funeral in 2 weeks, I imagine.
Right, exactly.
So, what were those 2 weeks like for you?
Well, I had appreciated the experience. And so even though I did not welcome the moment, it just so happens that it was just an odd occurrence that happened that I was actually meeting him. And so I didn't welcome the moment because I still felt rejected, right? Because I felt like you were never there. Why am I even meeting you?
Hmm.
What does it even mean?
Hmm.
But the 2 weeks following, there was something within me where I kind of felt like I was glad that it happened. I was glad it was almost like the closure of a chapter. I always wanted to know who he was. And even though the experience wasn't the best experience and I didn't really welcome the experience, I was glad that it happened. And so those 2 weeks, I would say, I didn't give a lot of thought to it
Hmm.
other than the fact that I think I appreciated
Hmm.
that I had that moment, because if I never saw him again, who knows if he wouldn't have passed, if I would have.
So it's not like you met him once and there was a little bit of contact that was like initiated. It's like you met him one time and then
Right,
2 weeks later you were at his funeral.
right.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so I'm curious then, Johnny. So to meet him when you were 22 years old, how did that process come up? How did that opportunity come up for you?
My brother, my oldest brother, was actually living with him. Had no clue, had
Oh,
absolutely no clue. And he had come by to visit, and he says, "Hey, can you drop me off at our dad's house?" And of course, that's a peculiar statement. Drop you off at our dad's house? You know where our dad is?
so your brother,
My oldest brother, yes.
he knew who your dad was?
He knew who our dad was. And then, of course, as time went by, we discovered, in the aftermath of all of this, that there were, these, I wouldn't say family secrets, but they were just unspoken things that I didn't know about. Again, I was always the youngest of the bunch. And so again, I'm 22 years old. And so my oldest brother apparently had been living with him, and he said, "Hey, can you drop me off at our dad's house?"
Right.
And as we were going there, we were going back and forth. I said, "I'm just going to drop you off because I don't want to meet this guy because
Hmm.
here he is a half hour from where I live, and I don't know him." So that even made me feel like I don't owe anything more to this whole occurrence, right? And
Well,
so
how did you feel when you learned that your brother was living there?
I'm not sure how I felt about it. I was totally surprised.
So did he just bounce from one house to the other, like sometimes with you and sometimes not with you?
No, no, it just so happens that he was visiting, and I guess he was in transition, and so apparently he had a relationship with him, and I don't even know to the extent,
Mm,
how deep it was.
mm,
I just it was a weird kind of feeling because again, I just kind of felt like I was in the dark, but again, I never had that.
mhm.
And so maybe my brother understood because a part of our conversation and going there was him trying to convince me that I should go in and meet him.
Mm.
And I was thoroughly convinced that nope, I'm not going to go and meet him. I'm going to drop you off in front of his house and I'm going to keep going. But when I pulled up, I thought, okay, I don't have anything to lose. So why
Mhm.
don't I just go in? And I'm glad I did.
Right.
I'm honestly glad I did.
So he didn't even expect that he was gonna meet you either?
He had no clue.
It wasn't even a planned meeting of any kind?
Exactly.
Mhm.
First time experience for both of us.
Unplanned first experience.
Exactly. Him just shaking my hand for a long time and just staring at me
Mhm.
for a good little minute and then saying, "Hey, well, come back and see me if you can." And that was the extent of the conversation.
Mm. Mhm. Did your other siblings meet him, or was it just your eldest brother and yourself?
My eldest brother, and what's so interesting about it is that in conversations after that, I discovered that my other brothers had very brief relationships with him,
Mm.
nothing like my eldest brother.
Was there a part of you that ever felt dumbfounded at some points to go, "What just happened here?"
Oh, absolutely. I got to tell you that internally, I was trying to process it all. You know what I mean? And then what does this mean to my life?
Mhm.
One of the things that I always just pondered is even though I always felt like I cannot miss what I didn't have, I always wanted to make sure that when I have children, that I would give them what I did not have and
Mhm.
I would give them me. And I just sort of felt like my dad never gave me him and I was never able to give him me. And again, when you're that age, you don't know what that means or what that
Mhm.
looks like. So in retrospect, you're able to look back and glance over it and think, maybe that's the reason I did what I did as a teenager and lived the level of life that I did because I was just acting out the fact that he was missing in action. And there
Right.
was this hole in my chest.
Mhm. Mhm. So earlier, a few moments ago, when we were talking about clearly at the time, you were in that survival mode, that survival space. But it was only later that you recognized that there's some missing ingredients in your life.
Right. Yes.
How would you describe those missing ingredients now?
They surfaced emotional emptiness. It was I started replacing feelings with drugs, alcohol. I'm not sure why I felt like abandoned. You know what I mean? There were those moments that I just sort of felt like maybe I'm the reason that my dad wasn't around. I didn't know how to process any of that. I just knew that he was missing from what I would see of other kids around me. Dads at baseball games, football games, the track meet, dads coming to the office at school or something. I just realized that those were those things that I didn't have. And so I tried to feel that emptiness, not even realizing that it was some level of emptiness, but
Mhm,
attaching myself to other guys around, because, you look to other guys to affirm you. And,
mhm,
so there were just the missing ingredients because somewhere along the way, I just thought that maybe I wasn't good enough to have a dad.
mm,
Right. And so I started just, replacing that feeling, that emptiness with drugs and alcohol. I had actually started doing drugs and alcohol at the age of 12.
Wow.
And so that's what my teenage life looked like.
So when you said that you were trying to find men to like relate to and stuff, I guess you're meaning like you were looking for role models?
Absolutely. I have to tell you that I come from the hood,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote,
Mm-hmm.
and so I have always felt that when you don't know who you are, everybody around you will tell you who you are. And if you've not had someone to affirm you, then that affirmation is oftentimes enough. Okay. And so if you're surrounded by guys that love to fight and you fight too, they tell you that you're this great fighter, but they don't tell you that you're really fighting for nothing. Who fights for street corners and
Mm-hmm.
property and
Mm-hmm.
territory, all of
Right.
those sort of things. And so that's the arena or the environment that I grew up in. And so that created all these toxic tantrums. And little did I know is that, I'm looking for people to be my role models, but the role models that they were definitely negative. But again, I didn't even know the difference between what a negative or a positive role model was. And so if you affirmed me, if you celebrated me, if you applauded me, even if I did something stupid, then I gravitated to your acceptance and your applause. And so,
It's external validation, right?
absolutely.
What we know about external validation is that's how your self-esteem is developed. So self-esteem is never something that we develop within ourselves. Self-esteem is measured by external factors.
Wow. That's pretty powerful. I never gave any of that thought, but that speaks to why I was the way that I was.
Right. And so
100%.
when you mentioned a moment ago, you were saying like if you didn't know who you were, then people around you would basically dictate your identity for you.
For sure.
So what sort of identity was created for you? Like what was your identity known as then?
I was, it never was in my heart to do, but I always played the role of just kind of, I was a wannabe gangbanger.
Hmm.
I was, again, I smoked anything that they rolled up. I would drink anything that we could buy from a liquor store. And again, at 12, 13, 14, and 15. And so I just really became the neighborhood nuisance, just, and really, honestly, I always knew within myself that that's not who I am.
So you knew like that's not me, but you also just didn't really know who to be. So
Exactly.
these are my people. This is how they see me. I'm just going to play this role a little longer.
100%. And that's what it was. It was a role, and I was accepted.
Yes, you were accepted. So did you feel like because I'm accepted, I'm safe, this is a good choice?
Absolutely. Safe was the magic word. You
Mm.
felt safe. You knew that these were people that quote unquote cared about you.
Hmm.
And so, because that was your level of experience, that you had friends, the ride or die, that these people cared about you to whatever level that extent was, you know what I mean? But these were the people you did life with. And even though you were doing life the wrong way, these were people you were doing life with.
And how long did that identity stay with you for?
I would say probably from the age of 12, because I can actually remember specifically at the age of 12 in the last year of elementary school. That's when elementary school went to the sixth grade. And then, of course, going all the way through middle school, pretty much through junior high school. My very last year, as if I snapped out of it. And
And so how old would you have been in junior high?
I would have been around 17 years old.
Okay.
Because I actually had my oldest son 2 weeks before my 18th birthday.
Isn't that interesting, the parallel with your mom?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's when my life shifted. I realized that there was substance going on that I needed to give attention to and pay attention to. And even though I hadn't been equipped for it,
Hmm.
I figured that that's no reason for me not to become equipped for what life may be in front of me now that I have a responsibility. And so it shifted then. But all of those previous years, yeah, I was just I was stuck on stupid. I
Mm-hmm.
was a pretty serious idiot.
Mm-hmm.
And again, trying to please everybody around me and just not, again, having an identity. And I think that's where my challenge was.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was supposed to be. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was anything and everything that I could be to just to be accepted in the community, or not necessarily in the community, but in the community of people that I did life with. But it shifted when I fell in love with this amazing girl who's been my wife for the past 43 years.
Mm-hmm.
We were just kids.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know what we were doing. But it was at that point that I realized that if I'm going to have some substance in my life, now is the time to start looking in that direction to make that happen.
Right. And you were really clear, like, okay, there's something going on here with my identity. And you had an opportunity or a noticing that I just want to be seen and maybe I can do it differently.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
And you articulate those things so much more better than I do. I think you just kind of stimulate my thought when you say certain things, but I had no clue
Mm-hmm.
that that's where I was or what was going on. I just knew that all of these years previous, and even though I was a young kid, didn't know any better,
Mm-hmm.
all of those years meant nothing. They had no substance. And I finally realized that I've got substance. I had no clue that I even understood what that meant. But, I think when you're looking through the glass of a hospital room and you're seeing a baby that's got your name attached to the crib, then it's time to get really honest and serious about some things. And that was my internal thought process.
And so would you say that you realized you had substance, that there was some substance here when your child was born? Like, would you say that was the moment that you had that moment for yourself, that epiphany, that aha, like, okay, there's substance here. There's a way for me to do this differently. Is that when it happened, or when did that moment really come up for you?
I think that was the moment.
Yeah.
I think that well, number one, of course, my girlfriend at the time, she was stable, she was consistent. You know what I mean? And why she was with me, I don't know. I wouldn't have picked me at the time, but she brought a little bit more stability to my world.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and what I mean by that is that I stopped drinking, stopped smoking, and all of the other stuff that I was just kind of doing just to be in the crowd, because I didn't have to be that with her. And I discovered that that's who I really was. I didn't want to do all of that stuff. And so she was probably the first contact to me understanding that there's more to my world than what has been in my
Mm.
world. You know what I mean? But little did I know I was still dealing with the challenges of it all. You know what I mean? It just doesn't go away.
Yeah, no, of course it doesn't go away, but it certainly sounds like from how you're sharing, this new identity naturally developed when you met your girlfriend who was stable and you found a way to be yourself.
100%. And what's interesting is that it was always there.
But it's almost like you could make the choices knowing that, oh, I can actually choose this too, and I won't be disregarded. Or because you were mentioning how that feeling of acceptance and safety really came from the place when you were affirmed or applauded or celebrated. But it sounds like only certain actions that you did would validate with affirmation.
Absolutely.
So I think what you were sharing with me just a second ago is that you had liberty and freedom to make different choices, knowing that she will still accept you and you will still be safe with her and that she'll still care about you. There was that sense of assurity that you had.
She was a safe place. You're absolutely right. And
Hmm.
I could be who I was, and I could be the person that I really was, because I struggled with that. I didn't like the lifestyle that I was
Right.
living, but again, it fit,
Yes.
the environment that I was in. And so you're absolutely right. I just remember as a kid going over my buddy's house with my crayons. I had a box of 8,
Hmm.
and he had a box of 64.
Right.
And I always wanted as a kid to get a box of 64
Right.
crayons because he had more
There's so
colors. He
many
had
colors,
more,
all the in between colors, right? Like,
all the in
yeah.
between. That's what I was. And it was like she brought out all of these extra. colors that were going on in
You brought out all the
my life.
64.
She had all 64.
And then probably there was a bonus pack, so you probably had some bonus colors there that came out too.
Had some bonus colors. She was the bonus
She
color,
was the
that's for
bonus color.
sure.
Oh, that's lovely. Interesting. So fascinating. So, Johnny, when people come to see me in like the therapy space, people are typically in one of three spots or three places when they come to see me. Some people are getting started where they're just like, I need therapy. I'm not sure where to start. I just know I'm just here. And so, we kind of explore what that looks like. Some people are in the middle of some part of their journey and they need support specifically in those areas and then realize maybe there are other things going on or they're able to still focus on that. Some people are looking back where they're needing to gain closure on some other parts of their life or they're trying to create new meaning or whatever it may be. But typically, along that spectrum, people are in one of those three places. What part of your journey would you say that you're in terms of this father wound? Would you say that you are getting started in the middle or looking back?
I would say I'm looking back.
You're looking back. And what would you want to remember about the process of your healing journey? Maybe the question is not what do you want to remember about the process, but maybe the question is what do you need to remind yourself of so that you continue looking back?
The responsibility. The thing that brought responsibility to my life was a shift in my life, right? And particularly when I had my first
Mm-hmm.
son. And I went from understanding what it meant to be responsible because I stood there thinking to myself, I got to be
Mm-hmm.
responsible now. But there's a difference of just thinking I got to be responsible and then stepping into what do I need to do to be responsible? I need to position myself to be able to respond to what I'm going through. And so for me, just my ability to say, okay, I'm not going to be able to conquer what I don't confront. And so all of these issues that are in me, the missing wound, the missing dad, the emptiness, and all of those things, they were still there. And there were still these battles that I had internally and all these toxic tantrums. I still wanted to be all of that, but I made a decision that that's not what I wanted, that I wanted more, that there was more to what I had become, honestly. And so when I look back, I think about that if there was anything, it's like I realized that there was more to what I had become. One of my favorite movies is The Lion King.
Right.
And in a scene in The Lion King, of course, Mufasa appears to Simba out of a vision. And he tells him that you've forgotten me. He says, no, Dad, I haven't forgotten you. He says, oh, yeah, you've forgotten me because you've forgotten who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, you're more than what you have become. That's my greatest scene in the cartoon depiction of The Lion King. He says that you are more than what you've become. And I just remember standing there looking through that glass window at my oldest son, thinking that maybe I'm more than what I had become. And of course, I didn't know how to articulate it
Mm-hmm.
then. Thank goodness for The Lion King. But I was more than what I'd become. And so and I look back and realize that I took responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so that took me to an entirely different place in my life. And
Mm-hmm.
then also I forgave not just my dad for not being there, but I forgave myself for
Mm-hmm.
not being there. And I felt like forgiving myself was the gift that I needed to give myself because
Yes.
I knew that I couldn't go on if I didn't forgive myself and stop penalizing myself
Mm-hmm.
and punishing myself for how I felt. And that was a work through. I mean, that didn't just happen
For
overnight.
sure.
I mean, I had to work through all of those feelings that I felt that it was my fault. And then I just discovered that no, when I begin to challenge myself and confront my own internal issues
Mm-hmm.
and my own flesh
Mm-hmm.
monsters,
Mm-hmm.
and I understood that it wasn't my fault. And I don't have to punish myself
Right.
because I just happen to be in the middle of the mix.
Those are really great reminders, and that I'm sure helps you to keep looking back with such clarity.
For sure. Yeah. And I look back just to remind myself of just where I've come from because I'm not where I used to be,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not where I'm going to be because of course I continue to grow and I continue to invest in myself as a dad. I've always wanted to be the best dad. I always wanted to be the best husband that I could be. And so even to this day, I still work at that
Mm-hmm.
because that's my goal. I want to be the absolute best dad that I can be. And of course, all of my children are adults. And I've got four amazing grandchildren. And so one of which we do things together,
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit things of helping people. But I look back just to remind me that I've come a long way, but I also have some distance to
Mm-hmm.
go, and I'm
It's
thankful.
a really great reminder and a great reflection when you can really recognize this is where I have come through and this is where I still need to go.
Yeah, it's life is a journey, of course. I know, but it's walking through it. And oftentimes, when people ask, "How are you?" My response is, "I'm walking through it just like everybody
Mm-hmm.
else." I'm able to make some good choices. I understand that things happen that you don't have any control over, and you just kind of walk it out, and you just make the best choices, the best decisions, and just be the absolute best you that you could be. And that's a work in progress. I continually work on myself. I'm
Sure.
not done. And I just sort of feel like if I'm not dead, then God's not done and I'm not done. And so when you speak of mental
Mental beauty. Yeah.
beauty, to just be able to live in peace with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that you don't have to be a victim, and knowing that life is a big place and there's just so many opportunities. And but again, it takes a lot of growth. I'm definitely still in the oven baking.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of reflection there and refreshing thoughts about your process of looking back and where you're at and where you're still focusing. So, Johnny, I am now curious to ask you. We've been dabbling with it a little bit throughout our conversation, but I really want to know how your untold story has affected your mental health. Would you say that you can expand on any of the emotions that you experienced, or, did it take a physical toll on you in any way? Or did you have like certain thoughts that um, ran on repeat in your mind at any point?
Absolutely. At the age of 17, I contemplated suicide.
Mhm.
And again, it was because I just didn't feel that the pain of this absence, right? I mean, I didn't understand what all of that was, but it wasn't that I really wanted to end my life. I was just trying to eliminate the pain of it all because I didn't know what to do with
Mhm.
it. There were so many emotional issues that were going on at the time, and so as I look back, I just know that I was a hot mess.
Well, when you say pain, well, tell me about this pain. Can you describe the pain?
It was just the absence of not having, not feeling like I was good enough to have a dad,
Mhm.
good enough to have a family like I would see in others, and good enough to have somebody that would affirm me, good enough to have somebody that I could trust and to love. And so and I compare that, of course, with my own experience with my own children. Just the fact that they've had a dad, that we've had amazing conversations, we've been able to be vulnerable. I've been able to be vulnerable
Mhm.
with my
Mhm.
sons. That's not something that many men
Mhm.
often are able to do with their sons. I've got two sons and an amazing daughter, and the wealth of having a relationship with them is it's priceless. And so, as I look back, I was just this empty container.
Mm.
It's almost like I
Mm.
love to bake. And if I don't put enough sugar in, I taste it. If I don't put the baking powder in it, I taste it. I've had enough cakes and sweets to know that okay, something's
Right.
missing. Maybe I learned that from my experience of not having a dad, that something is missing.
Mm. So, like, there was a real yearning. Like, there's something not, there's a thing I don't have. And you couldn't place your fingers on it. You couldn't go, what is it?
You're right on point.
Mm.
I don't think I could have said that better. 100%. That was my struggle. I didn't know what it was
Mhm.
until like the light bulb flashed over my head as I was standing there looking through that glass window
Mhm.
in that
Mhm.
crib. It's like, oh my goodness, something shifted in my life,
Mhm.
but I knew I had to do something with it, right? And so it just wasn't a matter of just the shift alone.
Just the fact that you knew you had to execute action, you were gonna be pivoting in a very, like, intentional way.
You're absolutely right.
Mhm.
And so that was the launching
Yeah.
pad for the rest of my days and my years as a dad, in terms of just giving that moment focus. The rest of my life, even to this very day, I still make it a point to walk in that same focus. I still want to be a great dad, great grandfather. I just think I've got a lot to give and I want to give it.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for really, diving into the crux of your story and elaborating on the pain. These are really real things that you were experiencing. And it's mind blowing to know all that you were going through on the inside and how it might have been showing up on the outside, and just the transformation that you've had to go through in that period of time. So, I'm really curious now that, you've shared how you shifted and pivoted and created the life that you're living now. What is your key message to the listeners of our show? What do you want them to know?
I would say that it's so important that if you do not know your value, others will discount you, devalue you. In fact, you'll discount your own self, and then live in that level of discouragement. And so I would just encourage people to learn who they are. And that means sometimes surrounding yourself with mentors, people that do things better than you, associating with people like you, Salima, sitting down and walking through counsel and getting a different perspective and understanding what health is and healthy
Mhm,
boundaries,
mhm,
and it's okay not to be okay,
mhm,
you know,
mhm.
and to walk that out. And so I had to learn my value.
Mm. Learn value. Mhm.
You are more than what you have become. That's what
Yeah.
Mufasa told Simba. You are
Mhm.
more than what you have
We will use Lion King and
become.
to anchor us when we need to, right? Mhm.
Absolutely, I do. That's for sure.
Yeah. And it's interesting how certain lines in certain movies, they just plant within us, and we're like, "Oh, that was good." Or it just resonates so much for us. And so Lion King was for you. I really appreciate what you spoke about in terms of value, and how if you're not aware of your value, the ripple effect of how it might show up in your surroundings with people. So, what a great message. Okay, so Johnny, I'm curious. What would you say was game changing for you in terms of inspiration? If we're talking about something that was really close to you that reflects your untold story, what was that game changing inspiration? Was there like a book or a quote or a person or an event, something that really kind of helped you pivot or kept your momentum going once you did pivot?
I think just for me, just remembering my past, honestly, and I don't encourage people to walk through their past. And perhaps maybe it was just holding my son in my arms at
Mm,
17 years old, and then realizing that life is more than every experience and every negative experience and every lie that you believed. And, there's more to life than just what you've experienced. My experience was very dark,
mm,
but I am just so thankful that I had people that had light in them,
mm.
that turned that light on.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful remembering for sure. Okay, Johnny, who are we giving a shout out to today? What is a cause or organization that has been impactful to you that you would like to give a shout out to? Who might that be?
I want to give a shout out to Chloe Cares. That's Chloe with a K, Cares with a K. Chloe Cares. That's my granddaughter, Chloe Thompson,
Okay.
who started a nonprofit organization at the age of 8 years old when she met a homeless woman in a park and wondered, why is she there? And when asked to hug her, she says, well, I can't hug you because I just wed on myself. That turned her life around, because Chloe, from that point forward, started giving attention to homeless communities and people in the homeless communities. She's gone to Ghana and built toilets and all sorts of things between the age of 8 to 15. She's 15 years old. And so I love talking about her, so don't get me started.
Well, then we give that shout out to Chloe Cares. That's beautiful. So incredible to hear that she got her inspiration from such a young age and that she's keeping it going and that she has someone like you in her life who's helping her get her reach, people involved and aware. That's wonderful. So, okay, so then how can people connect with you if they would like to? What platforms are you available on?
On Instagram, I am Johnny Thompson.
Okay.
I am Johnny Thompson. And of course, just on Facebook, of course, Johnny Thompson.
All right.
Sanctuary Church, mysanctuary.com. That's where I hang out and serve. And so if there's anyone that would like to connect with me there, that's a connection spot as well.
Okay, amazing. Well, we will make sure it's all on the show notes page for today's episode. But aside from that, Johnny, guess what?
Oh, man.
You've just dared yourself to share. Congrats.
Thank you, Salima. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm honored to be a part of the vision of what you do. And so thank you. I'm honored. I appreciate it.
Johnny, I would just like to take a moment to express my gratitude for the story that you've shared today, tapping into the father wound and the physical and emotional absence and how you were impacted by it, how you sorted through it, the extent of reframing that you've been able to consider and reconsider. This was done with such courage and bravery today. Your story, no doubt, Johnny, will encourage others to dive into their experiences and tap into their vulnerabilities as well. I am truly grateful to have been able to hear and witness your story today. So thank you for the deep conversation and for all the daring and sharing.
Thank you, Salima. I appreciate you.
Wonderful. And once again, Johnny, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.